Welcome to Just Rest, burnout tips for everyday radicals who are tired but not giving up. I'm your host, Nicole Havelka, bringing you tips and inspiration to help you feel seen and supported on your radical rest journey. Let's go.
Hi, and welcome. Oh, you just heard my very raspy voice. This is Nicole Havelka, host of Just Rest, burnout tips for everyday radicals. And today with me, I have Malik Turley of the Tapas movement, a friend and co-conspirator and someone I know that you're going to love talking to. Malik didn't set out to be a change instigator. That's the first thing to know about her. She simply wanted to create opportunities for women to move their bodies without self-loathing that seemed to permeate spaces like gyms and dance studios that tended to be focused on getting smaller or changing the state of your body or competing with the person next to you. So she created that space that didn't exist. And 20 years after teaching her first class, she's also a certified yoga therapist, a yoga teacher, a dance teacher, movement instructor, and who's working to change the world. And I have benefited from some of those welcoming movement spaces that she has created. In fact, that's how we found one another online several years ago. And so I'm super excited to have her here. Malik, take it away. What else would you add to that introduction?
Oh, gosh. Thanks for introducing me and thanks for having me. It's always lovely to talk with you. What else about me? I left the U.S. and I live in Spain and brought my work with me and have really seen how different things are across the pond, as they say. And it helped me understand some of the challenges that I was used to seeing and working against as things that are very U.S. focused and are just different over here. So it's been an interesting transition, and I'm looking forward to talking more about all of that stuff.
That's exactly it. And that actually is a great segue. One of my first questions that I wanted to ask was about your move from the U.S. You had lived in the Chicago area, Evanston in particular, your whole life, correct?
Mm-hmm. Most of my life.
Most of your life had lived in that area. And then you and your husband decided, let's move somewhere else, and ended up in Valencia, Spain. And I would love to hear more about that journey and how that has changed your relationship to rest. Because of what you were just mentioning, these things that were like things you're pushing back about culturally is a very U.S. thing and not as big of a problem, at least not in Spain.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I'm only familiar really with Valencia. And I will say that Spain is a whole country and that each city, each area has a different personality. And Valencia's personality is very relaxed and very people focused, I guess would be the best way to put it. So whether that's within a family, that the family unit is really important, or within a group of friends, that making time for each other is important, but also at the market, you're standing in a line, but it's not even a line, and you just wait. You don't press and try and speed people up and whatnot. So it's a very relaxed place. But how did we get here? So we had the benefit of an opportunity through my husband's work that moved us from the States to somewhere in Europe. We picked Spain because they would let us have our sweet dog, and none of the other countries available to us would. Then picked Valencia based on things I found on the internet. We had never been to Spain before we got here. And our first day was probably the most abrupt introduction to the differences in Spain from the U.S. We arrived on a Sunday, and here everything stops on Sunday. There's no grocery stores open. There's no running to, well, we don't have Target, but there's nothing like that available on Sundays. The city is pretty much quiet, except for bars and restaurants. You can go to a bar or a restaurant. And to amplify that, we got here on a Sunday in August. And the month of August is the month of rest. It is like the month made for Nicole. You need to visit Spain in August
I
because
do. It's my birthday month.
right? People are like, oh, nope, it's August. I'm on vacation. I'm on holiday. And either you have people visiting here from somewhere else who are on holiday, or you have stores that just have a paper sign in the window saying, yeah, we decided to take vacation this week or this month. See you in September.
Yeah.
So coming from the US and the Chicago area that is very bustly, very busy, and it's very much a 24/7 culture in the US. We got here on a Sunday afternoon, and I guess it was morning, but still, we got to our temporary housing that we had and needed to go to the grocery. No, because all the grocery people were resting. But we found a little corner market that had some fruit and olive oil, because you can get olive oil pretty much anywhere here. Eggs, right? So we could do breakfast. And then a person we'd connected with met us with a bag full of staples that he had gotten for us on Saturday when things were open, knowing that we were getting here on a Sunday. And that whole experience, everything being closed, having to just sit and sip something at a cafeteria because nothing else was available, and being greeted by someone who took the time and energy to make sure we had what we needed, was Spain, was my experience of Spain in a nutshell. So it was great. And then from there, the differences are, again, really shocking. And it's little things. Like in the US, if you go to Google and say, look up a store, and it says the hours are this to that, you're pretty much guaranteed that if you go to that store, they'll be open in that time. Here, it's like more of a suggestion. Because the store will be open, but if it said it was going to be open at 10 and the person opening the store, I don't know, had something to do that morning, it might open at 11. It might open tomorrow. Well, I don't know. We'll see, Or in August, it might open in a month. And that's just fine. That's just how it works. And so, yeah. So that's, in a nutshell, a little bit about our move here.
Yeah, I love that image of someone having a bag of groceries for you as you came in, knowing that stores weren't open on Sunday. And I know we're about the same age. So like, I do remember a time when I was young, I was pretty young when that was still the case. Like, that was the thing even in the US, like stores had at least a day a week that they weren't open, and you would have to work around that. I think the 24/7 or the 7-day-a-week grocery happened when I was pretty young, but like but I do remember like you didn't go to places because they were closed, and that was just a thing, and how that's changed in even like our lifetimes. Yeah. And that there was, even in the US, which is a much more focused on grind culture than other places, even that has amplified in the last several decades, which is interesting to think about.
Yeah.
So one of the things I also am always curious about and want to make part of this podcast is people's spiritual or religious backgrounds that come in or that factor into their rest practices. Because you'll know from the bio, everyone, that I'm an ordained clergy person as well in the United Church of Christ. And I happen to know that Malik is Jewish and you practiced Shabbat. I'm not sure if that was your whole life. So say more about that. Was that something your whole life or something you did later in life? I'm not sure about that. It's always since I've known you. But I don't know where it came before that.
This is one of those, you said that we're about the same age, consequences of being older. I can say, oh, well, I haven't been a practicing Jewish human for that long. It was only, in the last 20 years. But it's been 20 years.
Right.
So,
right. It's been a minute.
It's a thing.
Right.
If you don't know, I'm 54 right now. So I was in my 30s when I converted to Judaism, definitely an adult. And I adopted a lot of the practices in Shabbat was one of the first things that I took on, and it is probably one of the most meaningful parts of my practice. We're still observing it here in Spain. There aren't as many Jewish people over here, but there are some. And we do our Shabbat dinner every Friday, my husband and I. Sometimes we invite other friends to join us. And then Saturday is a day that's completely reserved for anything that isn't work, right? So yes, we use electricity. We can use money, all of those things, but there is no work that happens. My husband doesn't work. I don't work. And that is a non-negotiable thing for me. That has definitely cost me opportunities in work, right? Because people might want a workshop on a Saturday, or, oh, I would totally come to your class if only you had it on Saturday at noon, or what have you. And I've always said, no, I teach on Sunday, I teach on Friday during the day, but I'm not available on Saturday. And I think having that one day, that 25-hour period of rest, was incredibly important to me when I was in the US and more in that grind culture, because I was working pretty much all the other time. I carved out Shabbat and I held it firm, but I would work right up until sundown. And then as soon as the sun went down again on Saturday, I might do work in the evening, right? And that one day was my respite. It was my time to recharge, my time where I didn't have to think about work stuff. And I wasn't allowed to think about work stuff, right? Now here, because my whole life is different, I'm not as pressed for holding that space, like with tightly gripped fists. And yet I still honor it and still appreciate it because of its intentional rest as opposed to accidental rest, if that makes sense. So, yeah, that's definitely a part of how I make decisions work-wise, what I choose to do in terms of family and friends. My husband and I generally spend Shabbat together, sundown through Saturday sundown, rather than running around and doing different things with different people. Yeah. So.
Yeah. How has that shifted and changed? I mean, not necessarily Shabbat. How do you close and reopen it, so to speak, that ritual, in the context of Valencia, which you're describing as this incredibly laid back, stores may not even open when they say they're going to open, or that day even, or, so you don't have the same pressure to start working again that you would here, which I'm guilty of the same thing. If I say, oh, this is the day I've blocked off, and these days I also just happens to work for me that I do Saturdays, then I'm like firing the computer back up on Saturday night to check email or do whatever I need to do for the next week or prep for the next week. So I'm wondering how that's shifted and changed. Do you actually take more time now than you used to?
Yeah, but not for Shabbat. I mean, it's still different, right? Shabbat stays itself, but we have weekends. And I know weekends exist in the US, but they really didn't for me because I would work on Sunday, right? So I had that one day. So now, every week, I have at least 2 days in a row where I don't work. It's kind of magic. But I would now, for example, if you had asked me to do this session on a Sunday, I can work on Sunday. It's more optional. Whereas if you had asked me to do it on a Saturday, the answer would have been no. Period.
I wouldn't ask on a Saturday because I know better.
I know. But since coming here, I went from working more than full time. I don't really want to think about how many hours I was spending working in the US, to working part-time and very much part-time, very intentionally part-time. And having gone from, in the US, work being the thing that I planned around, now it's the rest of my life that I plan work around. And I understand also that that's coming from a place of privilege, that I don't have to work full time. And yet I feel like even if I did, living here, that full time looks and feels different. I have friends who work full time and it's just different. There's more rest built into the day here. And I don't know how much of this you want to be about the way Spain works, but there's 5 meals a day here, and meals aren't done on the fly. They're not done in your car. They're not done while you're walking down the street. So that's 5 pauses in every day that just don't exist in the US, you know?
This is a really great perspective to have in an early episode, because it is giving us, like, which will probably be a largely US based listenership. Although I'm told that anyone who's English speaking can find you all over the place. So who knows? Maybe now, because of this, I'll get this great listenership in Spain. I don't know. Or in Valencia at minimum, but we'll see.
Right.
That's so interesting, the contrast between the two places. And it is on my list of things to do, is to come to visit Valencia and to do a whole month in August. Like, I hadn't even quite thought that much detail, but I'm noting that for when I make my travel plans for sure. To do my birthday. It's now on my bucket list, birthday month in Valencia, or at least anywhere in Europe that takes the month of August off, because that's a European thing, not just in Spain.
Correct. It is.
Yeah.
And we get the visitors. We get the Europeans leaving their country to come to us.
Yeah. So because this episode will air on January 1st, and culturally in the West anyway, it's celebrated as this, to ring in the beginning of the new year. Of course, that's not particularly religious at all. Like, it's cultural, not religious, at least in the West, right? Because the new year in the Jewish calendar usually falls sometime in fall. Technically, though it doesn't get celebrated this way, in Christianity, the beginning of the year is actually Advent. The 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, that's considered the new year, the beginning of the new liturgical cycle anyway. Okay. But it doesn't get celebrated as like big hoopla and fireworks and whatnot that we do in New Year's culturally. And I bet most Christians don't even know that little fact, honestly. I certainly didn't until I went to seminary. So that's the way I know it. And I mention it periodically just so people might know that little bit of trivia. It might come up in bar trivia someday, who knows. But anyway, I really thought that New Year's is a really great window into some of the things that your activism, if you will, like, I think tries to shine a light on and is a really good starting point for people. So let's talk a little bit about what happens at New Year's. And I actually I've done this in years prior, but I did a new round of like Googling research on New Year's resolutions in particular, because of what it tells us about us. Not because I care all that much about New Year's resolutions, though I have done any number of, I advocate in some of the work that I've done. I have some videos out there, and I've done some teaching programs about advocating to set a New Year's intention rather than resolution. And those words don't mean a whole lot of difference, but the way I talk about it, I think the way the baggage around intention is different because resolution in our culture has a different baggage. So here's what I found. None of this will shock you. Okay. And I'm sure most of the listeners out there won't be surprised by this either. So the most common kinds of resolutions, and these are US-based surveys, are typically getting more exercise, eating healthier. They don't ask you to define what healthier means, but people will say eating healthier. Sometimes that takes the form of like giving up certain bad foods or alcohol, things like that. Improving mental health has now come to the list, which is a little bit different than when I've done research in the past. And then this is a smaller number of people, but increasing savings or overall financial wellness. That is on the list. But here's what else is really interesting about this. The success rate of resolutions, not great. Also not surprising probably to you or anyone else. On one survey I found, and the numbers vary a little bit, but the most extreme version is that as high as 92% of these fail. And they fail pretty quickly. And so I would love to talk a little bit about, first of all, like just what does it say about us that these are our big resolutions or the things that we want to do to make ourselves better in the coming year as we're looking toward a new year. What do you think that says about the culture, and how does that relate to some of the things that you've been trying to dismantle about bodies and movement and all of that?
Well, you said I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm actually surprised that the resolutions are so open, or not open, but the idea of I want to move more or I want to eat better. Better is, I have feelings about that, but those are not I want to lose weight, which is what I thought you were going to say. Now,
Right.
Are they probably going that direction? We can extrapolate, but it was surprising to me that they came out as the way that they did. I think that what happens with New Year's resolutions is that people look at themselves, where they are, who they are, how their life is being lived, and they write something down that is going to fix whatever it is that they find when they do that looking. And the reason that they have a desire to fix those things is societally influenced, right? And I wish that we could find a way to exist in a little bit of a vacuum and give people, if you want to take a look at the past year and, what is it that wasn't working for you or what have you, that's all great. Except that you're doing that thinking while being inundated with ads on TV. And, well, actually, I don't watch TV. I don't know. Do you still have commercials? I think you do. Anyway, but if you're seeing any of that kind of media, you're being told, whether explicitly or implicitly, that who you are and how you are is wrong. Because if everything about you is fine, you don't need to spend any money to fix it. But if we can chip away at everything you believe about yourself and make sure you feel really bad about yourself, specifically between November 20, whenever Thanksgiving is, and January 1st, you are very likely to spend a whole lot of your resources, time and money, to fix that. And so that's what's happening around people as they're making these resolutions, right? Do I think it's good for people to have more movement in their lives? Absolutely. Absolutely. Do I think it's a good idea to be aware of what you're eating or how you're fueling your body? Sure. If you can do that without throwing shade at yourself, well, that's great. I don't think it's a great idea to decide that on the first of the year, these magic things are all going to change. I'm going to do everything differently because what I was doing before is bad and what I'm going to do in the future is good, because you're setting yourself up for failure. And then you spend the rest of the year knowing that you wrote that stuff down on the first and you didn't do it. And so you're preparing yourself even more for that slog of needing to spend your time and money and energy to fix things that probably weren't actually wrong in the first place.
Right. It was interesting that they didn't, at least the articles, I'm sure if I did a deeper dive, I would maybe find some list, or that's what they intend is about losing weight. Because that's certainly what I hear from most people. Maybe not anymore. The people I hang out with now don't do that sort of thing anymore. But like the weight loss tends to be in there. But what it seems to me is happening, if it's true that most of these resolutions don't come to pass, is that people are in some sort of shame spiral, because we as a culture in the US are also so success-based. And for those of you not watching this on video, like I'm using air quotes there. And so there's so much disappointment and often shame that comes from not meeting up the expectations we set for ourselves or sometimes others. And it really is so damaging, I think, to us, not just about this, about bodies and how our bodies look and feel. And it's not even about feeling how our bodies feel. It's how our bodies look is really what that's oriented toward, which thanks to Malik was Malik was one of my entry points into this rejection of diet culture. We can talk about what that is. We haven't used that phrase yet, what that is and how it contributes to burnout. And I think this shame spiral is a big part of that. Because one of the things I think that happens, whether it's at New Year's resolution or not, what we're doing is that we're setting ourselves up constantly for this failure shame spiral, because there's ample statistics on the fact that intentional dieting in the way that it's done most of the time in the US is not at all effective, certainly not in the long term. There's statistics, and I can pull some of these up and put them in. Maybe you have some articles or books, suggestions that I'm happy to put in the show notes as well. There's ample research that it doesn't work. Like, you might lose the weight, and many times not, even in the short term. But even if you lose it in the short term, generally speaking, it'll come back within 5 years and you'll have gained more weight back. And that weight loss and gain cycle is harder on your body than just staying overweight by those standards. And I'm using air quotes. And so this is a piece of what's burning people out, especially women. I think people in female presenting bodies, that we're taught that we need to be pretty happy, calm, and thin is probably one of those that gets mentioned as a beauty standard. And you need to do that on top of all the work you need to do. And you need to do that really exceptionally well, too, in our culture, which is a kind of perfectionism that no one can actually live up to, because we're humans and bodies are different. And different bodies carry weight in different ways. And it's actually not all that bad. So say more about that diet culture and how that shame spiral works.
Yeah, well, and I want to say, you mentioned just there that people who are existing in the world as women are given this message louder and more persistently than others. And that is absolutely true. And the overall message is that we're supposed to be small. Yes, thin. And that's where the diet piece comes in, but it's small in all ways, right? We're not supposed to be too tall or too strong, because that's scary. We're not supposed to be taking up too much space, because that space really is reserved for those who are in male bodies, right? We barely are allowed to exist, right? So that's the overall message. And then the work that we have to do to stay small, to get and stay small, keeps us from doing many other things. If all of your time and energy is focused on making less of yourself, you're not going to do that big stuff at work or push to the next level of whatever it is that you're passionate about, because you're too distracted by trying valiantly to make yourself smaller. And so it's really all about control. And that is what diet culture is. It is a tool to control primarily women. And when you look at it that way, if you think about the fact that those ads on TV that are telling you that you need to measure every bite of food that you put in your mouth and track it in one of the 70 million apps that are available for a fee to do the same thing. When you think about the fact that that's in order to control you, I hope that makes you mad and makes you want to push back, because the myth that diet culture sells is that it's about health and wellness. And there is absolutely not validity in that. You can be healthy and well and take up space. Whether that's you're healthy, well, and tall, you're healthy, well, and strong, you're healthy, well, and fat. You can do all of those things. That's all possible. But that's scary. And so it's better if we keep you focused on measuring out how many grapes you ate today rather than figuring out a cure for cancer. I really feel like if we didn't have diet culture, we would have cured cancer already. I really do. Think about the collective brain power that is wasted on this pursuit of small that is not an achievable goal for many people, nor do I think it ought to be a goal for many people. If that brain power was turned to something else, I'm pretty sure we could solve a lot of the world's problems. Cure cancer, solve the hunger crisis, end a few wars. Like, we could do a lot of work, but we're too distracted.
You just blew my mind. I had not ever thought before about the time that gets focused in on solving as people like the obesity crisis that often gets tossed around in, which honestly, some of that is also a corporately manufactured problem, especially in the US because of the cheap availability of highly processed foods, which I was excited to hear that someone is finally taking this on, that there was a lawsuit filed, I think in San Francisco, against, I don't remember which one. I'm going to look this up so that we can put this information in there. But I heard it, really this was just in the last couple of weeks, that the local state's attorney or something like that, I think, had filed a lawsuit against a big companies for knowingly putting foods out that are knowingly doing it, knowing that they were bad for people, and intentionally targeting poor communities of color, other things like that, where they know who they're making unhealthy and that they know that what they're doing in order to make money. So I'm glad that there's some awareness of that, but that's like this big at this point, I think. So to some degree, the problem is manufactured by corporations as well.
If you think about, BMI, which hopefully now most people recognize as being a faulty measure for just about anything, but definitely a faulty measure on a person-by-person basis. That wasn't what it was meant to do. So even if we pretend that it was a good thing to begin with, it wasn't meant to be a personal, like, oh, my number is this and that means this about me. But if we take another step back, the math was only built on one type of human. And we have so many types of humans that do not share the same type of constitution as those that were used for the study. It was broken from the get-go and then was used, I would say maliciously, to keep the masses in check, keep the masses in control. It's definitely manufactured.
It is manufactured, for sure. So now that we're pulling apart this, the other thing I'm wondering is if we weren't so obsessed with how much and what we're eating and what our weight is, could we be using that time better in actually getting rest that is good for our bodies? Because that's stressful on our bodies to be thinking like that. It's stressful to restrict calories on your body. It increases things like cortisol. It actually signals to your body to save fat when your body is stressed like that. Or if you're over-exercising, that ends up happening for some people. If you're doing too much movement, there's diminishing returns on that. And I've been someone who's done that. I'd speak that as someone who's done that kind of thing to their body. And I can promise you that it's not great later in life to what it does later, even though it felt what I thought felt good in the moment. So what do we do about all of that? And I really want to give people simple, practical tips, because when you talk about the system as a whole, like, well, what the hell am I going to do about that company that's selling the crap food at the grocery store? Not a whole lot other than not buy it, right? So there's a tip for you. Don't buy it if you can avoid it. But I also know, because our culture in the US is built around this hyper productivity. People feel they need those convenience foods just to survive, right? I can't figure out how to feed my kids if I'm not grabbing boxed macaroni and cheese, which is totally understandable. We're not casting shade on that if that's your reality, by the way. So what are some simple things we can do to begin pushing back against this and then claiming the space we rightfully should claim? I think, again, regardless of the size of your body, like just take up the space you're supposed to take up, people. If you get nothing else out of this podcast today, I hope you get that. Take up space. It's okay.
Take it up. Exactly. Right. I mean, there's so much that we can do. And I think the first thing is just to remember. So when you have a thought about, oh, I shouldn't eat that, or, oh, I should be working out, or the size of my clothes are wrong, just pausing when you have that thought and going, that is not real. That is diet culture. And you can continue and not eat the thing. Like if you're like, oh no, I shouldn't eat another grape. Just think, oh wait, that's diet culture. And then make your decision whether you're going to have the next grape or not. Or are you going to go for that workout? Or are you going to, do whatever else? So being aware of it and getting to the point where you see it, where you notice when the conversation turns to, oh, what's your best low-fat whatever recipe? Why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? Oh, that's diet culture. Right. Okay. Do I want to keep doing it? No, I don't think so. And then move on. So that's one thing. The other is start noticing how much value you place on how other people look. And how much time are you spending thinking about how other people look, usually in comparison to how you look, is what tends to happen, right? But if we start noticing that and noticing that, oh, wait, I have friends. My friend group is all different sizes and shapes. And I think they're all people of value, which is why they're my friends. Well, maybe it doesn't matter what size or shape they are. Maybe that's not how I picked my friends. Maybe that's not how people pick me as a friend, right? But we have to start questioning our thought processes. Because once you get into that, once you start applying critical thinking skills to the things that you've just taken for granted your whole life, then you can go, oh, I'm going to do this one thing a little bit differently. But if you're not noticing it, there's no way to do that. You have to start with noticing. But in terms of concrete, practical things, and now I'm going to say this, and I'm going to own that I am here, and I know, Nicole, you are here. If, for example, when we were sick, we didn't do things, I say, as I'm dealing with the tail end of a cold, I'm not sure what Nicole's has going on, but just that, taking time when you're sick is a tiny thing, but it shows you that you value your body and you value your health and prioritize that over other things. Now, I am at the tail end of what I have. This cough will stay with me for a while, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to turn off my whole life for the time when I'm coughing. I feel fine. I'm totally fine. But I did, on the first 2 days of this cold, not press. I had things that I canceled. I had things I didn't do. I had places I wanted to go and I didn't go because my body was telling me that I needed rest. And your body will tell you those things, whether it's because you're sick or because you're injured, or maybe it'll tell you that it's time to eat that grape because you're hungry, right? If we get back to listening to our body and doing what it needs rather than what society says it should do, that is a way individually to push back against diet culture. Is probably a longer answer than you wanted.
No, that's totally fine. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that both of us are clearly working through colds, or I think mine is a run-of-the-mill sinus infection. I don't feel terribly virusy as part of why, if I were like feverish, I would probably have to just stop because I wouldn't be able to do this. I'd be delirious. I would probably not be able to get out of bed very easily, as I did this morning, relatively speaking. But even with that, my body's fighting an infection. It needs more rest in order to fight said infection. And I'm not doing that as well as I could be. Full disclosure, the rest of the day is completely open once we're done with this. And we're recording earlier, in my time, earlier in the morning. So I do have a lighter day after this planned. And I know that my voice won't take doing 3 of these in a day. And no one was available later today anyway. So it was fine. So I do get some time off after this. And I really do try to be better attentive to not working while I'm sick. And I used to plow through the things I used to do. I have a really vivid memory. I didn't intend to tell this story, but it's coming up, that there was one time that I had to lead a 2-day event/retreat for some colleagues. I was living in Iowa at the time, in Florida. So I had to travel. And much worse than I sound right now, I had a horrible head cold and I traveled anyway. Which, as you know, when you're congested and you go up in a plane and you have all that air pressure in a plane, it feels horrible. Not only that, then I'm sneezing all over the people sitting next to me, which are things that I just would not do anymore.
Well, I think COVID helped with that.
COVID broke that in many of us. Anyway, probably not all, but many of us. So I'm like, no, stay in the house. I haven't left my apartment in 2 days because I'm sick. I've continued to work because I work at home anyway, but I have taken more naps and time to cook for myself, things that I know will help me recover and that kind of thing.
There's systemic stuff there too.
Yeah.
To come back to the differences in the U.S. and other places, most of the time in the U.S., when you're sick, if you have a regular job, you work for a company, you have sick days maybe, or maybe you just have a bank of days off that are sick and vacation. And so you're sick, so you can take that day off. Now, you won't get as much vacation later, so you're taking the time off now and losing time in the future. But here, and I was so flummoxed when it happened. We managed, in our whole time in the U.S., we didn't get COVID. And then we got it when we got here in December. We got here in August, and we got it in December. And I got it really bad, and my husband had it, but his symptoms were nowhere near as rough as mine. But he did take, a day or 2 off of work, right? Which is fine, because he has time. Or, I thought that he had time. No, it doesn't work that way here. Don't worry, it's better. So you don't eat into your vacation time when you're sick. You get a lower amount of pay, but you still get paid. And you still hold all of your vacation time, and you don't work until you're well. And when you're well, you come back to work. And then, whatnot. And I was completely shocked. I'm like, wait, but you get to be sick today and you get to go on vacation later? What?
Another mind-blowing moment to me as well. So yeah, that's crazy.
Exactly. That rest, that expectation of taking the time when you are sick is something that hustle culture has no patience for. Corporate culture has very little patience for it. We are not avoiding listening to our bodies in a vacuum. We've been taught not to. We've been taught that the expectation is that we keep going and that we keep going no matter what. We keep going with work. We keep going on the pursuit of being smaller. We just keep going. We have to keep pushing. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. It doesn't. And in lieu of all of us moving to Valencia, which I'm sure Valencia could not handle, the entirety of the United States moving to its relatively small place overnight, And I'm sure that wouldn't even happen anyway, quite frankly. But who knows? Maybe this is like a big advertisement for Valencia. But and the dozens of people who might listen to the episode, or hundreds, we'll say hundreds just to be optimistic. Let's do it. Let's do it. So not pushing through maybe as often could be one of those things that we suggest, that even if you do it once this week or month, every single day I'm confronted with choices about, I need to do these other 10 things or whatever, however many things there are. I need to do these other 10 things and I'm tired or I'm sick or whatever. Do I push through or not?
Right.
And maybe more often, like even if it's just once this month or week or whatever, that you make the choice not to push through.
Yeah.
I feel like that is really going to be a good thing for our bodies and our nervous systems. And in the long run, our weight probably as well. I know neither of us cares about our weight, but there's also evidence that like not getting enough sleep or rest contributes to weight gain, y'all. So this notion that you have to like be pushing and doing more like exercise, and we're all for like healthy movement and doing things that make you feel good, but you can be doing so much of that it's at the expense of your health, actually, for sure. And not just because you might injure your knee or something like that. That is true, but there's more to that than that. And if you're curious, start looking up more about diet culture, because it's out there. There's stuff out there for sure. You've already described some of this, but what are some simple practices that you do to rest? And that's the expansiveness of rest. That doesn't mean just sleep or laying around watching TV, which you don't even do. Like, you don't watch TV. But, like, those are kind of typical things that one might do. What are the things that you do, like, even just, like, in micro things that you do to rest?
Yeah. A lot of these are probably going to be, again, and I'm not trying to do an ad for, come to Spain, but the learning I've done since being here has been really profound. So one small thing, when you have a meal, have the meal, and not have the meal and check your email, have the meal and go somewhere, like have the meal in your car on the way to somewhere. Just sit and eat. You have the time. You can eat breakfast. You can eat lunch. You can eat dinner as an event, right? So it sounds small, and yet it's incredibly radical, because you're not trying to get more done in a space of time. Your day is going to shift. If you sit and eat breakfast and then do whatever else you're going to do, we feel like, oh, there's no way. My morning is so rushed. There's no way I could do that. But if you really stop and think about it, it only takes like 15, 20 minutes to eat a meal. You're not eating Thanksgiving. You're just eating a breakfast, right? And that alone makes a difference. Also, if you are on your phone, on any site where there's ads, you're being given information that is influenced by diet culture while you're eating. And there's some cognitive dissonance that happens there, that you're taking information in through your phone while you're taking the food in. In yoga, we think of all of that as you're consuming, right? It's not just food, it's what you see and whatnot. So push that away and just let your meal be your meal. Just that. One tiny thing, right? But you get to practice it multiple times a day, because hopefully you're eating more than one meal a day. Maybe not 5 like we do here, but, a couple.
Right.
So that's one way that I rest. I also will do bullet journaling. And the time that I sit and I put my bullet journal together, I do minimalist bullet journaling. I'm not drawing pictures. I'm using it for like keeping track of my life and whatnot. I consider that restful, because I'm taking the time to sit and reflect and plan rather than go. So that feels restful to me. Spending time with friends and partners counts as rest to me, right? Because, again, you're not trying to produce anything. Giving yourself a break from making, doing, what have you, Now, I also rest when I paint, which is technically producing something, but I'm not painting it's not my side hustle. I just paint because I like to paint. So that's another way that I work in to rest.
I think those are great. I think one of the things I want to do for our listeners is to also make this simple to some degree, or make the system isn't simple that creates these problems, but there are actionable things we can do to resist that are very doable in our day. And I'm going to take away that reminder that you just gave us to sit and eat a meal. I actually did it just the other day because I'm like, you do have a lot of things, but you can just eat lunch. Like stop for a second. I also love that you're highlighting like actually being reflective about your time. And that's one of the big things that I do in the community that I have formed, is that people come to me often for time management stuff, which I still find a little bit funny. But soon I'm going to be launching what I'm calling the Calm Calendar Club, which will be an offering for some regular resources on how to be reflective about your time, setting intentions, and aligning your use of time with those intentions and making priorities that reflect them. Because if we're not doing that reflective work, I think what ends up happening is that we follow whatever shiny object is in front of us. And that is often other people's priorities. And that's not always a bad thing. Maybe you're a parent to small children and that is your priority, is prioritizing the needs of a 3-year-old that doesn't have the ability, right, to schedule their needs, right? Because they're 3, they're going to be doing what they do at their age, and that's okay. But you then schedule yourself in such a way that you're going to have to respond to those little humans' needs,
and then you're modeling for those little humans.
Right.
I mean, I think that's why things work the way they work here, because it's generation after generation of people doing the thing. So, of course, you take a break from work at 10 to go have your second breakfast. Why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
Everybody does that. Of course. It's like not even a question.
Yeah.
But that's because, the little kids are seeing their parents and, so on and so forth. Multiple generations of almuerzo, of that second breakfast. It's just part of the culture.
Right.
So what is it that you want in your life, whatever your situation is, that you want to instill as part of your family culture? Do you want your 3-year-old to see that you're eating a granola bar while you're packing the bag, while you're on the phone and trying to teach them their letters? Or do you want to see that it's time to sit down and have lunch, and maybe we'll talk about letters while we're eating, but we're just going to eat now, and then we're going to do X, Y, or Z? We can make big changes in small ways, which I think is what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, because just think about a world in which we all just sat, and you live it now, Malik. If in the U.S. we all agreed that we're going to sit down to have our meals without being at our laptop or on the phone or doing another thing. What if we did that, right? That is a huge difference in our culture, a huge difference in what seems like an insignificant change. And so that's the thing that I'm hoping people take away. So I know we could talk forever. I have a couple more questions that I want to do is wrapping up. And one of the things I do with folks who are part of my community, I call them my rest rebels. And so if you were going to finish the prompt, Dear Rest Rebels, what would you like to say to them today, to our listeners, to the folks who have already found their way to me and to you? Dear Rest Rebels.
Yes. Dear Rest Rebels, I would like for you to know that you have value every single day, regardless of before or after New Year's, regardless of resolutions, regardless of the amount of space you take up in the world. You have value.
I love that. I love that. That's so great. And then next, is there an organization that you think is doing really good work in the world that you would like to lift up their good work? And as a thank you for taking your time out today to talk with me, I'll give them a small donation as well.
Can I lift up a type of organization?
For sure.
Rather than a specific one, and then let you in your community find these
For
organizations?
sure.
I have been so impressed with the way my original home community has come together to provide for the people in the community during all of the government shutdown, the removal of the benefits, chaos that's happening in the US. And so that these small communities are coming together and providing for their own, protecting their own, has been really beautiful to see. I mean, I hate that they have to, but seeing that and seeing how much that impacts people directly, I think is amazing. And so if you can find one of those organizations in your community and support them. If I had to do a more global style or big organization, I would say World Central Kitchen. We had a horrific flood here a year ago, and I maybe didn't know that World Central Kitchen existed before it, but seeing what they did and how long they did it and how much they helped was amazing. So that would be a big organization that I would list.
Yeah, and they are a big, amazing organization that goes to war zones, that goes to major disasters like that all over the world, which is really remarkable. But equally remarkable is your local food pantry, your local soup kitchen, all those places that are often not only feeding people, but creating spots for community as people are gathering. And I think a benefit to the nonsense that's happening at the federal level of the either reduction. Well, there's SNAP benefits are going to be massively reduced even now that the government has been refunded for a few months. That's going to happen. And so we need each other more than ever. And if we get connected with our neighbors, that's never a bad thing. I don't like the reason for it either. But if we're connecting with our neighbors and doing something as fundamental as feeding each other, I think that's a great one to be lifting up, particularly the conversation that we were just having. I think that's really fantastic. And then finally, how can people find more of the amazing Malik? I want more people to find the awesome, the writing, the painting, the movement classes that you teach, that you're still teaching online, I think, or not. You can tell me, update me. I actually don't know for sure.
By the time this airs, yes, they will be available online. Okay. They've been on hiatus for a little while, but the easiest thing to do, I would say, would be to go to my website, which is Tapas Movement, TAPAS movement.com, because that's sort of a hub for information. I am on the socials, as it were, but I have a very conflicted relationship with both the idea of social media and the platforms we currently have available. So I have not been active there, and I'm working on figuring out a way to communicate with people I don't know without funding people I know I don't want to fund. So my website is mine. And
Just go there.
My hosting company is giving back to the environment. And, so that's a safe spot for me. Yeah. So for sure, that's where you can find information.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Malik, for, again, giving your time, sharing your wisdom and your insights. And thank you for just all you do and how you show up in the world. So thank you so much for that. And I look forward for people to hear more about this.
Well, thanks for having me and for being your awesome resting self.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Remember, rest is not a retreat from the work we do in the world. It is the work. So if you're ready to rest and resist, here's what to do next. If you know someone who's running on empty, please share it with them. Hit subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss a single episode. Rate and review us so that other radicals can find us. consider joining us on Substack at defythetrend.substack.com, where you'll find bonus content, tips for everyday living, community connection, and resources to keep you grounded. Radicals, remember, you are worthy of rest.